Welcome all. My name is Sophia Abdul-Kawi, and welcome to our February edition of It's Taboo. Let's talk. Today's program actually is going to talk about intimacy, and this topic came up about a couple years ago. With my daughter and I, we went to this event, and we were talking about marriage. And there were so many questions that came across that presentation that we were talking about. How come no one talks about certain things that happen with married couples in terms of how do they treat each other, how are they cordial with each other, how do they make each other feel important in their relationship. And so the purpose of this program today, actually, we did the first one in 2 years ago, pre-COVID. Yep. And our first event we did, it was at Masjid Taqwa. It was very eventful, and everyone liked it. And so we wanted to do something again. Alhamdulillah, we had an opportunity to do it this year. So our purpose is to educate ourselves and our youth about marriage and intimacy. For those who are already married, it's good to have some, extra pointers to keep things going. And for those who are looking for spouses, and for the same reason, just to understand some of the things that they need to do to keep the relationship going, being kind to each other, emphasizing the importance of marriage and love in relationships is very important, and cultivating these relationships. As kids see their parents being nice to each other, it's also good for them, their emotional well-being as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Naja. She's going to open up the program with a wonderful poem. And then we have a wonderful set of panelists that is going to speak with you today. We have Dr. Shakeera Abdullah, Dr. Omar Sheref, Sister Zainab Abdul-Rahim, and we have Brother Gareth. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say and to share some of their wonderful expertise. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sophia. Assalamualaikum. So hello, you'll be seeing my face for most of the show. I'm Naja. How you going? I'm also the Arts and Culture Director for Muslim Sisters Staten Island. Our lovely Executive Director forgot to introduce herself as such, but it's okay. I think she's just too excited about the event, so there's just a lot going on. So we would like to start off the program by sharing a poem, because we're talking about intimacy. We're talking about like all those different things. What does that mean? What do we really know? Both people who are in a marriage, people looking for marriage, the idea of a relationship, all that fun stuff. So I hope you guys enjoy. A touch, a kiss, a gaze, different areas a person's eyes and hands can lay. Soft-spoken words wrapped in present bows with happy notes slipped in. As compliments, as gifts have a special way of sinking in to the hearts that yearn, that affection, admiration, quality time. Physical touch is not the only intimate outline. Over time, a person may find just existing around each other can occupy the mind. Check off boxes and balance time, because being intimate isn't just when two bodies rhyme, but when each body understands what the other's heart, mind, and spirit demands. Whether it's hearing how lovely they are, or the thought of them in your mind isn't far, whether you buy them a car or take them to their favorite bazaar, even holding their hand can go very far. Because intimacy isn't just one thing, it's a love language that you're constantly speaking. So that is my poem. I hope you guys enjoy and kind of got into the mood of today's topic. So I would like to introduce our first panelist. Drumroll, please. Dr. Shakeera Abdullah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam and warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. I'm so excited and honored to be here.
Awesome. Would you like to just introduce yourself for those? I feel like people will know who you are, but just in case you don't, let them know a little bit about you.
So I am Dr. Shakeera Abdullah. I'm also known as the Halal Sexpert. I'm a sexologist and a sexuality educator, primarily for the Muslim Ummah. I have a master's degree in human sexuality, and I'm a family nurse practitioner with a doctor of nursing practice degree. And I'm also, alhamdulillah, in school getting my PhD in human sexuality. And inshallah, make dua for me, everyone, that I graduate in 2023, inshallah. So I primarily educate the Muslim Ummah, the Muslim singles, Muslim parents, Muslim couples, about sexuality education from an Islamic perspective.
Wow. Oh, I'm ready to hear from you in a minute, but let me give everybody else the floor. Let me give other people the floor. All right. So thank you so much. Assalamualaikum. Next up, we're going to bring up Dr. Omar Sheref. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing all right. How about you, Najah?
I'm doing good, alhamdulillah. I feel pumped now that I read my poem.
It was
So can you tell us a little bit about, thank you so much. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. So I am a psychiatrist by practice. I graduated from St. George's University School of Medicine, where I earned both my MD and my MBA in healthcare management. And I did my residency at Nassau University Medical Center in East Meadow, Long Island. And I'm currently now doing my fellowship in public community psychiatry and psychodynamic psychotherapy at Columbia University. So it is an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight with you and everybody else.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate having you here. So now we're going to take the doctor. We have two doctors on stage. We're taking the doctor off. All right, so assalamualaikum. Boop. Next up, we will bring Sister Zainab Abdul-Rahim. Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Hey, Najah.
Hello. It's always nice seeing your face.
Half of it anyway, right?
Yeah, right. Alhamdulillah, Abdullah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Sister Zainab.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me here. I am super excited to be on again, working with Missy and with these amazing panelists, alhamdulillah. So my name is Zainab Abdul-Rahim. I am a mental health counselor and recovery specialist. I have my master's degree in school psychology, which I do not use because I'm not interested in school psychology. But I work predominantly on the case management side. I also do, again, private mental health counseling as well. I am the founder of the Muslim Wholehearted Initiative, which is a personal wellness and development initiative where we support Muslims in living Islam wholeheartedly. So thank you.
That's so amazing. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Wow. All right. So I'm going to take you off. The next person I'm going to be bringing up is going to be Gareth Bryant. So let me see. Is he ready? And he is pulling him up right now. And bam. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I'm Gareth Bryant. I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Good, alhamdulillah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Gareth Bryant. I'm a chaplain. I'm a counselor, therapist. I focus in many areas. One particular area that I'll be speaking about tonight is that I focus on addiction counseling, addiction therapy. So tonight I'll be focusing on addiction and how it plays into relationships.
Nice. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right. Boom. Off the screen we go. All right. So we will bring up our first panelist. So the way things are going to go, just for our audience to know, each panelist that you saw is going to come up. They're going to talk about an important subtopic involving intimacy. And after each panelist is done, you guys, please make sure you use the comment section, ask whatever questions you have. We want to make sure we hear from the community because it's for you as well. It's not just giving you information, but it's also making sure we're providing the information that you need and want, right? So we're going to first have Dr. Shakeera Abdullah come up and talk a little bit about sex, a little bit about that and halal and the spurt and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to take myself off the screen and give her the floor.
Okay, mashallah. So yes. So when we talk about sex and intimacy, so sex is a big part of intimacy, but intimacy is not all about sex. A lot of times we get that confused. Sometimes I guess we want to be modest. So instead of saying sex, we say intimacy. But intimacy is really all about showing up as yourself with your partner and allowing your partner to see the real you. So the raw you, the nervous you, the you are behind closed doors. It's all about authenticity and truth. So again, sex is a part of intimacy, but intimacy is not all about sex. There are so many different types. Tonight, I'm going to focus on emotional intimacy and spiritual intimacy. And of course, we can go into physical and sexual intimacy as well. But intimacy, I just want to clarify that it's all about being seen, heard, understood, accepted, and being engaged by your partner. So emotional intimacy is really how you see and respond to your partner and how they reciprocate it. So it's all about security. right? So when you're able to express yourself in a relationship and you feel supported by your partner, that creates a sense of emotional security, which in turn creates this space for vulnerability to occur. So, for example, for many women, sex is just as much as an emotional experience as it is a physical one. So, if she doesn't feel like you're her safe space emotionally with her feelings, she's not going to feel safe or comfortable sharing her body sexually with you. So, it's imperative that we build this emotional security within our relationship for more pleasurable sex. So, in order to cultivate emotional intimacy in a relationship, number one, you must be able to express your feelings. And number two, you have to accept them and then figure out what needs to happen next within a relationship to share that bond. The next aspect of intimacy I'm going to talk about is spiritual intimacy, which is all about creating this sacred connection with Allah as a couple, right? For us as Muslims. So we know our entire purpose in life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and serve him in everything that we do. So it only makes sense to include this aspect in our marriage, right? So some activities that I'll briefly go through that can increase your spiritual intimacy with your partner, especially as we're getting ready to prepare for Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, it's right around the corner, right? You can read Quran together, reflect on an ayah together. So not only read it, but actually reflect, go through a tafsir. Maybe, have a deeper discussion about the ayah and how it relates to your life at that moment. Participating in a weekly or like monthly couples fast and then engaging as to what aspects of it was challenging. So you see, it's an activity that you're doing together, but also taking time to branch off and talk about it and kind of reflect on it together. And those are just some examples of basic things that we can do to increase our spiritual intimacy in our marriage.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. Like, it's one thing watching you say things on Instagram and on Facebook, but then it's another thing hearing it like in real time. It's like, she's spitting facts, I feel. I think he's spitting facts. So, well, I'm going to bring the rest of the panelists, on board so that we can have kind of like a discussion about that and what their thoughts are and the perspective that they may have on like emotional intimacy as well as spiritual intimacy. So I'm going to be bringing up Dr. Omar Sheref, bringing up Brother Gareth Bryant, as well as Sister Zainab. Okay, so what are your guys' thoughts on like emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy? I need to hear from the experts or the semi-wants to be experts.
So I'll jump in. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Alhamdulillah. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Shakeera, for sharing. MashaAllah. I loved it. And I think for me, anytime I think of the word intimacy, especially in a relationship, simply put, it's safety, right? You feel safe to show up and be seen. And I think that's exactly what Dr. Shakeera said. And I think that that's really important. And it transcends intimate relationships as well. Like that's friendships, that's work, that's wherever you are. These are intimate types of relationships. And I think that it's important that we have safe spaces to show up and be ourselves authentically. So I loved it. I enjoyed.
Nice. Thank you. Any of the brothers want to chime in?
Gareth, you want to? Or would you like me?
Oh, I don't know if you can hear us. All right.
So my 2 cents on this is I absolutely agree with Dr. Shakeera and Sister Zainab on this. The way I like looking at it is from a male perspective. I think we are so fixated on just the physical act. So like when we hear the word sex, the only thing that really jives with us or clicks is the act, the actual physical act of it. And everything else is sort of lost on us. And I can't generalize all men, but I'm just saying that speaking in the society we grow up in, that's kind of how it's presented to us. So when it comes down to intimacy for most men registers as simply just the physical act of intercourse. And we miss something that's a lot more deep about this, in that I look at it as not just a biological function, but it's biological, psychological, social, and spiritual. It's a combination of all of that together in one. Biologically speaking, it's a human function that we have, that Allah created our bodies with this intent and purpose. Secondly is psychological. Psychologically speaking, the act of sex cannot be divorced from your emotions and your feelings. It's inherently tied as one and the other. A third is social. Social is just like what Dr. Shakeera was mentioning, is that this is a bond between two people coming together, and that the social connection that you have with your significant other is crucial to this, because it's not just a soul experience, it's a shared experience. Absolutely. That you have. And then lastly, spiritual. In that for all of us, this is something that is not meant to just be an act for the sake of just an act. Everything, if done with the right intention, is an act of worship. And that means that the act of engaging in sexual intercourse is inherently in and of itself also an act of worship. It is spiritual. And in that regard, if you're able to achieve a sense of all four, it's a feeling that cannot be described. And that's what I think every single one of us is aiming towards by educating ourselves about that. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's also good for us to know like the perspective of both like men and women, right? Because there is that idea that like when you think of like sex or intimacy, right, that it's all physical, getting down to business. Sorry, I'm very blunt. Right. However, there's many aspects to it. It's very multifaceted, but when we put it into like one category, one box, it can remove kind of like the humanistic quality, right? It can remove that aspect that can connect this on a higher level with something, if it is just the physical part, with being more than just physical, right? Gareth, can you hear us? Are you able to hear us? Because I know there's a loading issue, I think, on his end. Hold on. I'm going to try removing him from the screen and then bringing him back on. Can you hear us, Gareth? No, I think there's something wrong loading. Hopefully it'll like catch up. So I'm going to just remove him for, can you hear us? Or it might be delayed. It might be delayed. So if anything, hopefully he'll catch up, but I'll just message him in the chat. Something more, because I wanted to add into the conversation, right? So you talked a little bit, Dr. Shakeera, about like the idea of like knowing your partner and being comfortable with yourself, and also becoming comfortable like with your partner. Like, what are your guys' like thoughts about that idea? Like, do you think that's important? Do you think that, you know, I would love to hear your guys' perspective on that as well. Anybody wants to go first?
Well, I just wanted to add that, you know, our dear Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was like our best example. And he even understood the different aspects of intimacy and how like women see it and men see it. And he used to emphasize foreplay to his companions, like, you know, the men, like, listen, one of his hadiths is, and don't quote me exactly, but one of his hadiths is that, you know, he said, don't go into your wives like an animal. Make sure you have kisses and sweet words in between them. Right. And that's foreplay, and that's understanding that emotional aspect that a lot of women hold close to, feeling that, you know, that vulnerability, that safe space within the relationship first before they can get physical. And, you know, talking to the men is like, listen, you know, take a pause, hold up. You need to make sure you have these things first, you know, as you're getting ready to engage with their wife. So he was just amazing in every aspect, subhanAllah. So I really just wanted to hold some space for that, for us to like recognize that that's a part of our religion, that's our example, and not to feel I don't know, shy or dirty, again, you know, different things, that those different taboo type of ideas that we have, and that's not from our religion. Right. So I really, whenever I get in front of people, I always like to just clarify that like, that's not Islam.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for sharing that. Does anybody want to add on to that or agree or?
No, just want to say preach, sis. That's it.
No, I
mean, the title of the event is Taboo. I mean, that's why this is so important. That I don't know. Give me 5 masajid that have actually had like structured events about sexual health in our. Right. We don't talk about it. It's not a topic that it's all hush hush. It's all quiet. It's only when someone gets abused. It's only when someone gets hurt. It's only when someone gets, you know, wounded by something like this. Then a conversation gets brought up. And even when it's brought up, there's so much stigma around this and shame around this. And to me, it's like mind-boggling because our sunnah is nothing like this. If anything, we're the ones that are backward and in the dark about it. Versus when you look at the greatest generation, the Sahaba were very open and very explicit with their questions. You know, to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The reason why we're even to have these ahadith about sexuality is because this was something that was very open.
Absolutely.
And it's a function that was given to us by Allah. Why are we shaming something that's been given to us by our Lord? Like that's my that's my thought about it. Like I have to thank Muslim Sisters Staten Island for doing this, and I would hope whoever's listening, if you come from a community that is in the dark about this, then I cannot impress this enough about you. Bring us, contact us, bring us to your most. Let us talk about this and shine a light on this.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that we absolutely. No, I think you make such an excellent point, Dr. Omar. I think oftentimes we adopt this ideology of Islam where there are certain topics that are off limits, right? Like we have to be shy and timid. And this is the complete opposite, as you both have mentioned, of our religion. Like Rasulullah SAW, he talked about everything. Like Aisha, she asked him questions. Remember, this was a young girl. She was curious. She had that innocent curiosity. And this is a hikmah from Allah that she was so young, right? Because she had this curiosity where she asked any and everything. And I think that as we, adopt whatever practices of Islam we have, we tend to leave that part off. And it's I think it's problematic for us, especially those of us who are raising children, in particular girls, right? Because we're teaching them that there's something shameful about their bodies, about their sexuality. And that, how are we expecting them to go into marriage? How are we expecting our sons to go into marriage, right? If we've never had these conversations with them. So I think that this is such an important topic. So I'm really happy that Missy decided to put this together. Hopefully by the end of this evening, it will no longer be taboo by Allah's permission.
I mean,
I mean. No, that's very much because I think because like I'm single as a Pringle, right? And so like so for like me, like I've had these conversations like right with my mom, with Sophia, about the fact that there are not these conversations about how everything is taboo. However, how could it be taboo if it's talked about by the Prophet? How could it be taboo if it's talked about in the Quran, right? We make certain things hush hush and quiet because of other parts of other society that we try to ingrain into Islam,
right?
When Islam never invited it, right? So I want to say thank you. I'm probably say thank you throughout the whole program, but I want to say thank you to you, and also thank you to like the listeners for coming and wanting to be a part of this conversation, because hopefully the information that we give to you all, you can relay that to those that may have not been able to attend or may not watch the video yet. It's going to be on YouTube, so you can watch it whenever. It's there forever. But also to kind of segue into like more of a conversation, right? One question I'm gonna actually bring up is, what advice do you have for new couples and already established couples on how to establish intimacy in their relationship? It's like, what advice would you have for someone who's like, they're just struggling, or maybe, they're not sure how to communicate with one another on like the idea of intimacy? Like, what would be some advice you might want to give them?
Well, I would say first to build like that closeness outside of sex. So outside of that physical, so you still want to build it, physical affection and, of course, within your sexual relationship, but also focusing more on your other aspects of intimacy. So whether that's your emotional, your, building that closeness outside of the bedroom so that you can feel safe with each other sexually and physically. So working on those simultaneously, but still putting more emphasis on, outside of the bedroom. And I think sometimes, of course, as a halal sexpert, they're like, what? You're supposed to be focusing on teaching me all these different positions and everything. Is like, that's not going to do anything for you if you don't feel comfortable with this person. So building that comfort, building that vulnerability, building that closeness, by just getting to know each other, as people outside, so that when it does come to physical affection and sexual intimacy, you're able to have that deeper connection and more pleasurable sex because you took the time out to really build intimacy outside of it.
Nice, thank you. Anybody else have advice that they want to give for anybody, any new couples or already long established couples?
Sister Zainab, you want to go?
Sure. I was going to say a lot of what I was going to say is going to parallel what Dr. Shakeera said, mashallah. So again, having these conversations, building intimacy outside of sexual intimacy, right? Asking your partner what they like, right? And being open to trying it, right? And I say this and I smile, but I'm really, really serious. When your partner is telling you something, they are communicating something to you. They're communicating their needs, and be open to trying it, right? Again, sometimes you may need a therapy intervention. You may need someone, a third party to support the conversation. It may be that uncomfortable for you. So, coming in and having a conversation with a therapist around what intimacy means for you, because there may be oftentimes, and I'm sure you can speak to this, Dr. Omar, as well, oftentimes when there are issues around intimacy, more times than not, there may be some trauma in their past that they haven't either unpacked, addressed, dealt with, and that may be at play, and why they may struggle to be intimate with their partner. So that would be my advice.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. I mean, I can't stress this enough, which is that the actual act of sex is a means of connection. Ultimately, that's what it is. It's you connecting with your spouse. But there are many other ways to connect with your spouse before that act. And the means of connection are building an emotional connection, building a physical connection, actual just touch, caressing. Like, are you able to do that without having any sort of psychological barriers in the way of doing that? Talking, that form of communication, gift giving. There are different love languages that everyone has. If you don't know what your love language is, then essentially we're having two people that speak fundamentally different languages trying to connect with each other, and everything will get lost in communication then. And then a lot of couples struggle with intimacy as a result and blame the intimacy or blame their physicality, when the truth is there's a myriad of other issues and problems that led to this. And the solution in that case is, just like Sister Zainab mentioned and Dr. Shakeera is pointing out, seeking help for it. I'm a big advocate of individual therapy. If you have your own difficulties and struggles and traumas that may affect you, a lot of Muslims in our community, and this is heartbreaking, but a lot of Muslims in our community have been victims of sexual abuse, either in our childhood when we're not even aware of it, or during our early teenage or adolescent years, or even as adults. And unfortunately, because of the taboo around sex itself, there's an even greater taboo around harm during sex, sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape, molestation. And these are conversations we're not having. And whenever anyone in our community suffers from this, you better believe it will deeply impact your ability to intimately connect with others. And I'm a strong advocate for individual therapy for yourself. And as a couple, if you're having difficulty connecting in terms of your sexuality, seeing a sex therapist or seeing a marital counselor or a marital therapist can be a great start to opening up that communication. Because oftentimes during the midst of these conversations, a lot of insecurities might come up, a lot of vulnerabilities might come up in these conversations. And that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that this is a safe place to explore it with one another without it rupturing the relationship itself. So that would be my 2 cents on this.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you also brought up something I think a lot more people are hearing about, which is love language, which we'll get into later, right? The idea of language. But so we're going to move forward. We're going to actually have you stay on, Dr. Omar, to talk about, culture and intimacy and how cultural practices can influence our relationships, right? So we're going to say assalamu alaikum real quick to Dr. Shakeera. So why I say Sharika, who's that? Shakeera. Why did I call you that? I apologize. I made you a whole alias. My bad. So we're going to say to Dr. Shakeera. This is Zainab.
I might be Zenobia. You never know.
All right, you might be, but the way I'm going tonight, you may very well be. Everyone gets a nickname today. So inshallah, I'll take us all off and have Dr. Omar speak.
All right, so just want to say Jazakallah khair. Thank you guys so much for fantastic discussion so far. So I'm just going to briefly touch upon a few things before we bring everyone back up on stage. And the first thing I want to touch upon is how important the conversation is about culture, specifically culture, and how it impacts us. And every single one of us comes from a different culture and a different walk of life, understandably. But because of this, I think one of the layers of stigma towards intimacy and sex comes from our cultural background. And now I can speak for my own cultural background, I come from a South Asian background. And in our culture, we view intimacy and sex in much of the same light, which is that this is something that is private. It's something that's personal. It's something that is hush hush. It's a taboo. It's not something that we speak openly about at all. And that if you do speak openly about it or talk about this, then it's considered to be something that's very crass, very lewd. It's looked down upon. It's unacceptable and inappropriate to talk about these things and discuss these things openly. And I can understand, of course, where this comes from, that for many couples, this is something that is very private and very personal and very intimate. The act itself is, yes, of course, absolutely. However, the conversation surrounding it is something that is absolutely crucial. And unfortunately, in many of our cultures, this is stifled. And when we're born and raised in these cultures, it becomes infused in us. It's inherent in us. And the attitudes that we then bring into our relationships from these cultures. Now, there's also a counterculture that's going to be important to talk about, which is when you go to the opposite extreme, in which sexuality and intimacy become something that is devoid of sanctity, devoid of honor, devoid of that spiritual aspect of it. And it merely becomes sexuality just for the sake of sexuality. And this is an unfortunate effect of us being raised where we are. That here in the West, here in America, in the society that we have, sex sells. And from a very young age, through all the marketing that's all around us, we are groomed from a very, very young age to respond to that. That sexuality is defined for us in the shows that we consume, the commercials that we watch, the way things are marketed to us, what is considered society beautiful and what is considered ugly in society. And we judge our appearances and judge our sexuality based on that. A big aspect of this is pornography itself, the availability of pornography and how pornography twists and warps the way we view sexuality and view the act of sex itself. And this is a huge aspect that I know Chaplain Gareth is going to touch more upon with his section on addiction. But it is an important conversation that we need to have that isn't being touched upon in this conversation. And everything that I talked about, which is the family culture you're raised in, the culture your heritage comes from in your community, then the culture broadly in the nation that you are in, and all these different layers being piled on top of one another. And then on top of that, you add your identity as a Muslim, then you're looking at how high this deck is stacked against you for having an open, honest discussion about intimacy and sexuality. So the only way to break past this is to do what we're doing right now, is to have an open, honest communication and conversation about this topic. And if you're not able to, then you're in the wrong circles. You need to find circles such as this and speakers such as ourselves to break the ice with conversations about this and to make it a healthier, more positive, sex positive conversation. Lastly, the last topic I want to touch upon is very briefly is on men's sexuality. And the important thing to note here, the one big takeaway, is that there is an extensive focus on men's sexuality. And I feel that a lot of it is toxic because it's inherently linked to masculinity and male identity. And this is seen in our culture right now about like how many bodies a guy has or how like sexually promiscuous a guy is, and how unlike in women, sexual promiscuity for men is actually something that's praiseworthy. It's something that makes you, I mean, quote unquote, a Chad or a Sigma male. You know, like it's praised for us to be this way, to be sexual conquerors, and that a man's worth and a man's dignity is tied to his sexuality. You know, and this is something that's unfortunate in that even the length of one's genitalia for men is considered a mark of manhood, a mark of how masculine or macho a man is. And because of this, when you flip it on the opposite, when you have young boys and young men that are raised with this kind of understanding, it twists and contorts us into something that is horrific. That our sexuality is seen as something that must be professed. It's something that is comparative. It's something that is conquering. It's something that needs to be better than others, better than anybody else. And that my worth and my value as a man is tied to this. Therefore, if I am not sexually active, if I don't have multiple partners, if I'm not able to exude my sexuality in a certain way, then I'm worthless as a man. I'm less than a man. I've lost a sense of my identity. And this is a conversation that I cannot fix in just a few minutes, but it is something that I think needs to be talked about in our communities, that there is a toxicity to the way men in particular are raised to see their sexuality and profess their sexuality. And then, of course, when you get into a relationship and all these issues that you've been born and raised with around you then come out in the midst of a relationship with your significant other, is it no wonder then why this becomes a breaking point for a lot of men in their relationships? So I will mention that as a crucial aspect of this conversation, and hope that, you know, the big takeaway from this is, for a lot of women that are listening, this is an important conversation to have with your men. And for any of the men that are listening, this is a really critical conversation to have with yourself about this, and to be honest about yourself and be honest about the way you perceive your identity and your sexuality. And if this is something that's difficult for you, then I would strongly recommend therapy being an option. It doesn't make you less of a man to get help and support from a professional on this. It doesn't make you any less sexually potent to have conversations about your psychology and your emotions. If anything, it'll actually make you better at expressing and giving love. So I would hope to any men that are listening to me, you take that away from this as an important thing to self-reflect on. So that being said, you know, that's what I got for myself, and Jazakallah khair for the platform, Muslim Sisters of Staten Island.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, again, like, it's good to have perspectives from both men and women, like, on this topic, because, again, so, like, especially with the way certain things can be, like, within the Muslim community, it's like, okay, the sisters talk to the sisters, and the brothers talk to the brothers, but nobody knows what the other is saying. And then when we're like, okay, let's get down to business, let's get married, it's like, I don't know nothing about them, right? You know, I don't know what their perspective is, right? So we're going to bring on the rest of the panelists to speak. So I'm going to bring up Dr. Shakeera, and see, I said your name right this time, look at me. Sister Zainab, as well as Brother Gareth Bryant. He has a little bit of technical issues with his camera, but I think he should still be able to communicate with us. So, sisters, brother, what are your ideas on what Dr. Omar just shared?
I think it was very insightful. I really enjoyed it and appreciated that male perspective, and then you tying into the mental aspect of it as well. I think it was priceless. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dr. Shakeera. That's high praise. I appreciate that. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, no, I did as well. I thought that you made some really excellent points, and I pray that our brothers that are listening specifically take a moment to reflect on that, because oftentimes I feel like women may say the same thing, but it is heard so differently. It's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, she said it. But I think sometimes coming from a man, the way that it is perceived is very, very different. And speaking of how men are measured by their sexuality or the number of notches on their belts, you know, this is the antithesis of Islam. Like, this has absolutely nothing to do with our religion, and we need to promote chastity, period, morality, period. And that goes across the board for our brothers and our sisters. So I thank you for talking about that.
So clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't know if Gareth can hear us. Can you hear us, Gareth? Okay.
Oh, you can only hear me.
Says you can only hear you. There might be a lag, so I'm just gonna let him know. If anything, if he chimes in and cuts me off, it's all good, because there's like a lag and stuff like that. But I'll talk in the interim while he kind of like gets back on pace. It is something, because that, like, again, I've heard talked about, because like I have, you know, male cousins, like, you know, I have friends, you know, that are males and stuff like that. So like that is a conversation, because I'm a very honest person, you know, that does come up, where they do feel that pressure that they do have to be a certain way, act a certain way, when it comes down to, you know, the idea of like sexuality, idea of sex, the idea of what's a real man, and
Mm-hmm.
what it takes to provide for their spouse or their partner and stuff like that. Similarly, how women have the same thing, right? Like what makes someone a real woman, what makes someone
Mm-hmm.
like a good wife, what makes someone a proper like wife, mother, spouse, in that type of way. But it's always, the conversations are always separate there, we don't have them together in the same spaces. And from my perspective, as a person who is single, as a person who inshallah will get married, make dua for me, right? You know it doesn't help when there aren't these conversations. It doesn't help make sure that we are going into these spaces, that we are looking for a spouse for the right reasons, right? That we aren't looking for a spouse just for physical reasons, that we're looking for them for other aspects, but also too that we become comfortable with these conversations, right? Because if we aren't comfortable with having these conversations, other people can give them information that will not help them, that exacerbate
Mm-hmm.
some of the information that they were wrongly given.
Yeah.
And that it essentially can crumble, right, or
Mm-hmm.
shatter whatever it has been built up from the people in the past or people even now within our ummah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to kind of work together. Inshallah, like again, the people who are part of this conversation, both the panelists, but the most people that are hearing it, even the people who may be hearing it in the background of the people who are watching it, inshallah, that does impact them, and hopefully have more of these conversations, and that this isn't like once in a 2-year thing that we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
COVID, but inshallah, something that we have more frequently because of how important it is, or how difficult it can be for people. So
Yeah.
speaking of which, is actually a question I wanted to bring up, which are, what are some examples that you can give newlyweds with like intimacy hesitancy, right? And I'm going to talk just a small bit about that. So like I know for like myself or other like young women, or even for like young men, there might be that hesitancy because we know nothing, right? Or like we're not that we know nothing, we know stuff, like there's the internet, but like we aren't taught things within like our massages, we aren't taught things in our Muslim community to engage with or have a conversation with before we become somebody's wife, before we become somebody's husband. So the idea of being intimate with like this foreign entity, essentially, depending on how strict certain people can be, or how they make it seem like another human being is a foreign alien, right? There is that issue of being hesitant, of wanting to be intimate with this person, even though you can be intimate with this person because it's now halal, because you are spouses. So whoever wants to like kick that off and talk about that, like what some examples that you can give people that might be hesitant about being intimate with like their partner and stuff like that.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
Are we talking specifically about just normal and natural shyness?
No, more so not necessarily. Well, we could talk, yes, about like normal natural shyness, but also to just the idea of being like maybe like just scared, the
Okay,
idea of them being
got it.
fearful, right? So it's like, oh, I could give an example of things that I've heard, right, from other sisters, right? So it's like, oh, well, will they like how my body looks? Will they like how my hair looks? Will they like whatever it is that we do in that intimate type of way? Because I don't know what I'm doing, right? So it's like, what advice, or like what examples or anything that you can give for people that do have that hesitancy, because they do have that fear of just the idea of being intimate with somebody in this type of way, and showing kind of like all of themselves, talking about in physically, but also to just in other ways. Some people may not be that emotionally connected with themselves, or be able to be that emotionally connected with another person.
So I would say, just because you're single doesn't mean that you can't educate yourself about your body fully first before, because it's so important that sometimes we get caught up in like what you said, like is my spouse gonna like me, or am I gonna be able to please them? And we don't recognize our own need for pleasure, right? Experiencing pleasure is your birthright. Allah created our bodies to be able to experience pleasure, not only in our genitals, but all over our bodies. So us taking time to learn about ourselves and finding different ways to experience pleasure even before we get married. And I don't mean masturbation, but I mean just finding different things that you like to do that makes you feel good in your everyday experiences. So whether that's food, whether that is sounds, whether that, just tapping into your senses, and that will help you learn who you are as a a sensual person, right? And then taking time to learn about your body, whether it's through, sexuality type of education courses where you're learning about all the things that Allah created for you and your body, so that you're well aware as to how you can experience pleasure. And then also taking time to learn about your future spouse's body, the male body or the opposite gender's body, and what that looks like and their different pleasure areas and how you can engage with them. And then because initially it's really about you feeling confident within yourself. So a lot of times, and I just speak from the women perspective, and a lot of young girls I meet are like, I'm buying all this lingerie and I'm keeping it in my house and I'm keeping it in my drawer, and then I can't wait to wear it for when I get married. I'm saving all this for when I get married. It's like, sis, you can put that on now for yourself to feel good about yourself. You like the way this feels on your skin, these different textures of different cloths feel on your skin, or you want to look at yourself in a mirror and you want to take pictures of yourself for yourself, you can do those things. And those different aspects of self-care, with feeling, doing whatever you need to do to feel confident and sexy within yourself, is first. Because if you don't feel that way within yourself, you're not going to feel that way with a partner, when you go and into the marriage. So I challenge all my beautiful single sisters to really work on yourself first and really gaining that confidence within you before you go and add on another person.
Yeah.
No, that was really good. And like, I mean, I know nothing, but like I say the same thing. I'm just like, do for like do what makes you feel happy, makes you feel joy, and like learn yourself first. Right, before trying to learn another person. And like I've had these conversations with like my Muslim friends, my non-Muslim friends, with my parents, with whoever, because I think that is the biggest thing from my perspective as like a single young Muslima, is that we try to learn everything about the other person, but we know nothing about ourselves.
Right?
Yeah, we know nothing about ourselves. We don't know what makes us happy. We don't know what makes us sad. We don't know what makes us angry. We don't know what our pet peeves are. And then we get into a relationship, we get into marriage, and then we find all this out then. And that could be frustrating because it's like, oh, like, why is this person breathing so much? Right? Or, why is, I hate it when hearing people chew, or it bothers me, if certain things aren't tidy a certain way. Like if we don't explore ourselves first, both, sexually, mentally, spiritually, different things like that, when we do try to engage with another person, it can be really difficult. So I do totally agree with that. Sister Zainab, did you want to add on that or say anything?
I know, I was gonna just say that, say for example, you don't know and you're already in the marriage. I think that one thing, because it happens so often, right? You get married, you don't really have an idea of what to do, who you are, what you like, what, let alone what your spouse likes, right? This is an opportunity, one, to be transparent. Transparency builds trust. Let them know you don't know, right? But this is an opportunity for you guys to, again, build that intimate connection by learning together, right? I may not have a lot of knowledge on, sexuality or intimacy or connection or pleasure, but this is an opportunity for us to learn together and kind of, build our bond as a couple. And we can learn each other and explore each other. We can, as they say, be one another's playground, for lack of a better word. Because oftentimes, unfortunately, in our tradition, we aren't teaching, especially young couples, we are not teaching young couples about their sexuality prior to marriage. We don't even cultivate a culture of sensuality, right? Oftentimes we see our parents, unfortunately, walking around frumpy. They're not even dressing up for their husbands. So we're not learning that as children. It's like on the job training within our marriages, right? So as a couple, you're kind of trying to figure it out in uncharted water. But it is an opportunity for you guys to build that connection together and learn and explore each other together.
Absolutely. And then what you said, Zainab, it just made me remember. I remember growing up seeing my parents that way. And it was like, it didn't make marriage something that was desirable for me, right? Especially compared to TV shows, the movies, the music. It's like, I want that.
Right.
Marry one day, but I could wait for,
Right. I'm like, okay.
What I want. So it's so important that we really depict marriage as this amazing, beautiful thing and talk to our children and help them see, you know, the beauty in it. That so it's more desirable than having a girlfriend or boyfriend, because our children are worthy of marriage and they deserve it. And that's, you know, Allah has put them on this beautiful pedestal, and they should recognize their worth and recognize their honor and not wanting to waste it on just anybody.
That's right. And if we don't make marriage look appealing and beautiful as the beautiful entity that it is, our children will not see value in it. Society already is moving away from marital relationships, right? We're just cohabitating. We're, what is it, lawfully, I forget the term, but we're moving away from marriage as a society. Our ummah will absolutely be affected by that. We will be impacted by that, and especially if we are not making it look desirable to them. So thank you for saying that, Dr. Shakeera. I think it's so important that we do better as parents, as young folks. We got work to do.
We do.
No. You guys, we could have a conversation for days. You know, about this. Do you want to touch upon anything, Dr. Omar?
No, the advice is fantastic. I mean, the only thing I would say about hesitancy with intimacy is that I think it's a matter of where we learn what we learn, because I think Dr. Shakeera and Sister Zainab are absolutely right. And I know that for a lot of young men and boys, oftentimes you're definitely not going to learn from your parents. You're definitely not learning it from your masjid community. You're most likely going to learn it from like your friends that are active. And you're also going to learn it from porn. And this is what we then bring into a relationship. You bring such a twisted way of viewing sexuality, because that's the only thing you've ever been taught, and the only thing you know. Everything else around it has always been haram, don't talk about this, haram. Or if you do talk about it, you know, there's something wrong with you. You're just like a really hormonal guy, and like go fast, you know, and like it's such a demeaning way to teach us sexuality. And then of course, when you live in a hyper-sexualized society where everything is marketed towards men this way, I mean, how can you really blame guys for this? And for me, what I do blame is our ignorance, that our own communities don't teach men. So where do we go for that education?
Right.
Obviously, all the wrong sources. And then we bring that ignorance into a marriage, and we hurt someone with that ignorance. We hurt ourselves with that ignorance. And then we break relationships because of what we have been led to believe this is what sex is. Because all my life, that's what I've been shown sex is. Sex isn't really about her pleasure. Sex is about power, control, dominance. This is what it is, because this is what pornography teaches me. This is what like other men teach me. This is what like TV, movies, like wherever you look, this is what men are portrayed as, like this. And naturally, of course, women look at men and then they wonder, what is wrong with you? How do you not see this as something emotional, something soft and delicate and gentle and sweet that we share? Because we've never been shown that for ourselves. And that's not a failing of our society. Society is literally what it is. It's a failing of our fathers, our uncles, our brothers, us men, and a failing of our community in not supporting our men to have proper channels by which to explore and understand and learn how to develop positive, healthy sexuality for ourselves.
And I would just add to that it also may be a failure of our parents, because women also struggle with pornography as well, and they compare their natural bodies to these porn stars just like the men, and they struggle with body positivity and body confidence and, you know, self-esteem because they've been watching this stuff. And parents, you know, we have to, as Muslim parents, have to have these conversations about sexuality with our children at a young age, all the way until, you know, they're 21 and out the house and married or however long, to start building that foundation upon, you know, as they grow with them, and then connecting it with their Islam, so with their spirituality, so that it fortifies them. Because like you said, we're living in a hypersexualized society, so they need something to ground them. And as our children are like new shahadas, right? They don't have that ability to just submit, and for us to just say, you know, it's haram to have sex outside of marriage, it's haram to do this and do that. It's like okay, I understand that, but they don't really have, Islam hasn't really entered their heart yet. So us as parents have to recognize that, and we have to do like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to really use his wisdom and talk to them on their developmental level. So it's so important that we educate our children about age appropriate content at their age level, beginning at age 3, all the way up until, like I said, until they're grown and out the house. I would say even then you still have discussions when they're married.
No, I agree with that, and also too, because I know Gareth's still having some like technical issues, but he did answer the question in our private chat, and he said to actually take the time to know the character, the behavior of their partner/spouse, as opposed to settling for the mythos they formulated via their minds or their hearts. Most people whom experience this form of intimacy choose to live with like a ghost, right? And from what I'm understanding and what he wrote is that that's true, right? We choose to kind of live with a ghost, or like you are just like, okay, I'm going to just do this thing, and it's the thing that's going to be done. It's going to take like 10, 15 minutes. I don't know the time frame. I'm just making up time, right? And like, all right, we're done. Right. Or, okay, they might hold my hand like, once a month or something like that, right? Because again, like, and we'll get further into like love languages as the conversation flows, because there is more to intimacy than just having sex. Yes, we're talking a lot about sex because sex and intimacy is always tied together. However, there is a lot more to the concept of intimacy than just having sex and those types of things. So I do, again, guys are really good. I feel like I'm learning a lot, again, as a single person, but I also feel like even if I was married, I probably would be still learning a lot from what you guys are speaking on. So thank you. So we will now segue to have Sister Zainab, only on the screen, to talk about the effects of mental illness on relationships, so like anxiety, trauma, depression, sexual dysfunction, all that fun stuff. So I'll be taking everyone else and myself off the screen and giving Sister Zainab the floor. Thank you.
Okay, is my audio okay? Just making sure you guys can hear me. Okay, thank you so much. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Once again, I'm really excited to be here. I think this is, as you can see, a really important conversation for us to have as a community. And I pray that this is the beginning of a much larger conversation. So I was asked to talk about how trauma can create negative patterns in relationships, right? So first and foremost, let's define trauma. What is trauma? Simply put, traumas are extreme life events that threaten your physical or psychological survival, right? So many of us, we experience trauma. Some of that trauma is clinically diagnosable, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? But many, many more of us, the majority of us, have trauma-related symptoms like physiological reactivity to like triggers, maybe a panic attack, chronic anxiety, feelings of anger, or even numbness. And one big one is a loss of trust, right? In addition, traumas like rape, that's a big one, childhood abuse. Even those who have gone through military combat, we know that a lot of veterans, they experience PTSD. They have a pileup of negative life events, unresolved chronic stress. Like say, for example, you've been unemployed for a long period of time. If you've been in past abusive relationships, or if you've grown up in a dysfunctional family, this can also cause like trauma-like reactions, and it makes you more susceptible to being emotionally triggered, right? So one of the things I wanted us to focus on are the 4 ways that trauma can negatively affect our marriages or an intimate relationship. There are more than 4, but there are more than 4, F1, but I'm going to restrict this conversation just for time to 4, right? So the first one is we get triggered into traumatized states, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his wisdom, he wired our brains in such a way that if we have unprocessed trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms or PTSD-like symptoms, right? Or if we experience chronic, ongoing stressful situations, we are likely to get triggered into those states of fight, flight, or freeze. And many of us are familiar with this, and maybe I'll elaborate on that a little bit. We encounter these situations that remind us of the original trauma or ongoing stressor of the situation. And our brain deems it important to protect us, right? And this is where that lovely, beautiful amygdala is wired to then take over and then create this and generate really this fighting or fleeing or freezing response. If there is something in a relationship that that creates like a conflict that our brain deems as an emergency, right? So this, and how it shows up in our relationships, this can lead to us saying things that we don't mean, right? We may scream, we may lose control, we'll feel overwhelmed, and we also may shut down, right? And these responses can cause our partners to feel attacked, oftentimes rejected or abandoned. And what's interesting about this as well is that it triggers an emergency response in them, right? So in short, the cycle continues, right? Fight, flight, or freezing. I'm sorry. Excuse me. So unprocessed traumas or ongoing serious chronic stressors can also cause it can bring us back to responses that are reminiscent of our childhood traumas, right? So say for example, you lived with an abusive parent. Or a parent with borderline personality disorder, a parent who indulged in substance use or alcohol use. Your brain, when you're experiencing something that feels similar to that, your brain will immediately go into that fight or flight or freeze mode to protect itself, right? It'll also show up in a relationship in what we call shame-based responses. So when we've experienced interpersonal traumas or something like chronic rejection, that can create within us toxic shame. A lot of the work that I do specifically is around unpacking shame. And just in full disclosure, that was something that I struggled with for a very, very long time because of traumas that I've experienced in my own past, right? Shame is something that is it's a destructive emotion, period, point blank, full stop. We can put a pin in it right there. It makes you want to hide or feel rage towards people that you perceive as having shamed or rejected you, right? It makes you hide important parts of yourself from your partner, right? You may put a wall up or a mask or mask your insecurities by attacking others or overcompensating, right? You're the smartest in the room. You're the best in the room. You've done it all. You've been through it all. You've seen it all, right? This is a shame-based response. It also makes it difficult for us to hear criticism. So if our spouse is telling us something, we immediately have a wall up, even if it's well-meaning. And this is because our defenses are going up. Like we're not waiting around for them to continue to criticize us because we can't handle it, right? We start to feel exposed. And this is a byproduct of shame because it makes you want to give up on relationships rather than fight for them. And then we also have what we call rigid negative beliefs about relationships, right? So if you've experienced relationship trauma, and again, you may not have been directly experienced, you may not have been the recipient of the relationship drama, but you may have witnessed it, right? So maybe you witnessed your mom or your dad be abused. Maybe you witnessed your siblings in an abusive relationship, right? You may have a dysfunctional family history that you really haven't dealt with. This can shape your beliefs around relationships in negative ways, right? Everyone is disposable. Everyone is expendable. I am constantly in a protect myself mode, right? And we have to be careful about these beliefs because what they do is they can bias how we perceive our partner's actions, right? and we begin to interpret them in the worst light. And it's interesting because I was recently having a conversation with someone about this, and she was sharing with me how she had so many walls up with her husband because of some of the traumas that she had experienced in her life. And she had gotten to a point where it was going to cost her her marriage, because every time they would get into a disagreement, as couples do, she was ready to pack her bags and leave. And she had finally, after a lot of just self-reflection, she had finally realized, you know what, listen, I chose to marry this person. This is a good person. He loves me. He wants the best for me. I need these walls to begin to come down, because I'm going to lose a person that really cares about me and that I really care about too. Again, as Muslims, we know we're supposed to have husnul dhan, a good opinion of one another. Who should we have the best opinion of if not our spouses, right? Also, one thing that's really important too is that trauma can lead us to choosing an unhealthy partner that we tend to stay with for way, way too long. So traumas in your family that it can leave you feeling insecure, right? And feeling that you don't deserve a healthy love. So when someone comes along that's interested in being married to you or being in a relationship with you, you're more likely to tolerate their stuff, their disrespect, their poor behavior, and make excuses for them rather than setting up healthy boundaries, or in many cases, or even leaving if necessary. So I just really wanted to just kind of share, that was really the gist of my conversation. And I wanted to share some of those points because I think that oftentimes when we don't address the traumas that we've experienced in our past, they always show up in our relationships. So when you are struggling with traumas, if you believe you have experienced traumas, it's really important for you to seek therapy. If you have someone that is close to you, a friend that you can kind of talk to and lean on, get some support, because it will definitely show up in your relationships. Barakallahu feek.
Oh wow. Clap it up for you. Assalamualaikum. That was great. And thank you so much for touching on that. Because like again, intimacy, relationships, everything is very multifaceted, right? There's not just one layer to everything. You know, we're like onions or like an iceberg.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right? You're so layered.
You know, like we look like there's a lot going on top, but wait till you get, you know, underneath, right? So I'm just going to bring everybody kind of back here with Dr. Shakeera, Dr. Omar, as well as Gareth. I think he can hear us, but he might just be responding more so in the chat. So yeah, I would love to hear everybody's responses on what Zainab just shared.
Dr. Shakeera, do you want to?
Yes, sorry. I'm so used to Zoom, sorry. I would say it's so important that you start that healing process when you're ready, when you are experiencing trauma, when you had experienced trauma, whether it happened yesterday or however long ago. As soon as you're ready to start that healing process, to definitely, I pray that Allah guides you to be able to and give you the strength to start that healing process, and how necessary and how important it is. So whether that's with, you know, a coach or a therapist, or, you know, whoever, it could be your best friend, whoever you have to really go on that journey of healing, and then learning how to communicate with your partner about everything, really, because I think within our marriages we lose that piece and not how to communicate our feelings clearly, what we like, what we don't like in the relationship, and then being able to just be open and honest and building that, again, that closeness and that vulnerability with each other. But I really, really enjoyed your presentation, Zainab. I really, it was everything. It was good.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Dr. Omar.
No, I was going to say, I mean, like, I know I'm biased because, you know, from psychiatry, I know how critical this conversation is, but like everything you said is so on point. Mm-hmm. And it's such a critical part of this conversation. You know, you can't have a conversation about intimacy and not talk about our human psychology and how our mental health affects that. It's they go hand in hand with each other. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate You say?
Absolutely. Right. No, alhamdulillah. I think it's so true. And even just to share, because I do like to share, because I think it's important that when we have these spaces that we're transparent in our own personal journeys. I think even for myself, having gone through a difficult marriage, understanding the role that I played, right? And, you know, having grace with myself, one, to forgive myself, and then two, to also heal, right? Having the courage to heal, because as Dr. Shakeera mentioned, like, it's so important, but it does take courage. It's not easy. It's not easy to do something that feels so counterintuitive, right? It's very comfortable to stay complacent. It's easy, right? But to do the work to heal so that you show up wholeheartedly and fully present in a marriage, in a relationship for yourself, it's hard work, but it's so worth it.
Yes,
Absolutely.
for yourself, and just recognizing, you know, your worth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people misconstrue that whenever symptoms like this come up in a relationship, like, for example, in cases of erectile dysfunction or vaginismus, or cases of like delayed ejaculation, anorgasmia, like all of these clinical terms that I'm throwing out there, a lot of them are based in it's initially a psychological trauma that occurs to you, and then it manifests as something physical during the act of sex or in the process of expressing sexuality. And that's an important thing to talk about, because I know that one of the biggest stigmas that we have in our Muslim community is that if I cannot have sex with someone, literally the physical act in which a man can't reach arousal, or for a woman, she cannot have penetrative sex because her vagina will not open and she herself is guarded about it. This does not mean that this person is broken and that because I cannot have sex with them, this is grounds for divorce, because this is my right in a marriage to have this. Oftentimes, these clinical conditions that I'm talking about, for example, inability to become aroused or inability to penetrate, usually, not always, but usually are the result of trauma. And that the way to fix this is not by doping someone up with medications or like injections and such. Really, it's like what Sister Zainab is mentioning, getting treatment and working with a therapist, working with a psychiatrist, working with a psychologist, working with a counselor, sex therapist, whoever it may be, but actually seeking treatment for that. This is especially the case for women that may have fertility issues. That for a lot of couples, the act of sex is for the express point and purpose of bearing children. And if a woman is unable to, for a physical reason, maybe it might be an issue with like ovulation, an issue with like her uterus, an issue with ovaries, whatever. There's a bunch of different issues that it may be. Unfortunately, what we do is we shame and we tear her apart for an inability to do something biological. And we attach the worth of a woman to her fertility. The same way that in the conversation I was having, we attach a man's masculinity to his sexuality, we do the opposite for women as well too.
Right.
You know, and ultimately we hurt ourselves in this. This is what Sister Zena mentions. Like, these are not overt traumas. These are very sinister, small, little traumas that build and build and build. Little comments from family members, comments from aunts and uncles, comments from our friends, things that we hear about other women and other men and what they go through. And then all of a sudden we internalize that for ourselves. Or even direct trauma, you know, us being abused, us having inappropriate sexual contact. You know, a lot of these things can deeply hurt us. And in the process of hurting us, it then hurts the relationship. It hurts the act and intimacy itself. But this is an important thing that I really want to emphasize based on what Dr. Shakeera and Sister Zainab were saying, which is the inability or difficulty to perform a sexual act or to exude sexuality does not mean that you are broken as a person, that you are broken as an individual, or that you yourself are incapable of having a fulfilling relationship of love, care, and tenderness. It does not. And this is so important because I feel a lot of young couples are willing to throw it away if they cannot have sex. And I understand that it might be a crucial thing for a lot of couples, that this is literally the reason why we marry, right? Is for this. If anything, this is what I want out of a relationship. And if I cannot have that, then I don't want a relationship. And I think it's a very all or nothing way of approaching this. And I mean, I know that Sister Zainab mentioned how high the divorce rates are in America. Honestly, I would point my finger at how high the divorce rates are in the Muslim community. And it really speaks to a lot of the trauma that we don't talk about, and a lot of the ignorance that we have about our own bodies and about what it is that we even want out of our relationships. So I love the conversation we're having. I really got to say, just Jazakallah khair, thank you, for talking about this. And anyone listening, honestly, if what Dr. Shakeera or Sister Zainab is saying resonates with you, I think the best thing you can do after this event, and I sincerely mean this, contact one of us, reach out to someone, or reach out to your local community and get connected with a mental health professional. Get connected with one of us. Start the conversation. Please, I don't want anyone waiting for a crisis in their marriage or waiting until you're on the precipice of divorce and now seeking help. Because oftentimes by then, the trauma has already compounded to such an extent that oftentimes it's not salvageable. You cannot salvage a relationship by that point. And I wouldn't want anyone, I would never wish this on anybody. So if what we're talking about tonight has hit you and it affects you, please seek help. Seek help, talk to someone, connect with one of us. We'll refer you to friends and colleagues that we know and start the conversation towards healing yourself. It's the best thing you can do for yourself, honestly.
Thank you for touching on that, because wow, sorry, I'm taking it in, because it was just a lot of things you guys said were really important and impactful. Because again, we penalize women for certain things sexually, we penalize men for certain things sexually. At the end of the day, we're hurting everybody, right? We're hurting everybody with putting all this pressure, this unnecessary and undue pressure onto men and women in this area, right? Because for instance, myself, right, growing up, they were okay, you can't have sex before marriage. Okay, cool. What do I do? Right? Or okay, well, when you are married, right, you can have sex, but what does that even mean? What does that entail? What is considered safe? Having safe sex, what's considered not safe sex? What are things we're allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? Right? Am I supposed to just be okay with whatever my husband wants? Can I ask for certain things? Right? And I'm mostly speaking obviously from a woman perspective, because that's what I am.
I feel like I apologize for cutting you off, but what you said in the beginning resonated with me so much. The importance of teaching what abstinence looks like. Right? What is the act of abstinence? Because I think that we it's very dogmatic. Fear Allah, stay away. What does that look like? Right? And if we proclaim that our deen is perfect, what does our deen say about the act of abstinence? And I definitely want Dr. Shakeera and Dr. Omar to speak to this, but I think that this is something that even as single adults, we have to understand what that looks like for us. What type of situation should we not go into? How do we interact with the opposite sex? What's going too far? What does it look like in real time? And I think that that's such an important and valid question. I really
Absolutely. So I educate parents and community leaders about this all the time, because we tell our children, like you said, Naja, we tell our children, having sex outside of marriage is haram, but it's how do I navigate that living in America, in anywhere that you live, where everyone else is doing it? How do I not do it? How is that really realistic? I've had Muslim parents say, can you just educate them about STIs and STDs and teach them how to use condoms, because they're probably going to do it anyway. And, unfortunately, this is what some Muslims have to come to. And it's no, Allah chooses Muslims. He chose you to be a Muslim. You have the power to do this, right? And reminding them that Allah is not going to put a burden on you that you can't bear. I just need to help you as a parent navigate this. So how do you set boundaries? How do you set clear boundaries with the opposite gender, whether you're working in school on a project, whether you have friends who you're cool with, quote unquote, who are from the opposite gender? How do you maintain modesty and a level of that online, on social media, and people sliding into each other's DMs, and now we have apps? And how do you maintain that? The importance of the wali, right? How do you include a wali in the process when you are looking to get married and you see someone who you're interested in? And a lot of young people think, oh, the wali is just, I'm just going to call my father in or my guardian in once I know for sure that I want to marry this person. And it's no, your wali is the buffer, right? Your wali is this. You can't just go up. I always say this analogy. You can't just go up to Beyonce and just talk to Beyonce, right? You're Beyonce. Allah says you are Beyonce, right? You will have this pedestal. you on this pedestal. No
Love
one can
that.
come up to you and talk to you. You got to go through my wali. And
Right.
women, you know, especially, don't do yourself a disservice by trying to go through the back door because you don't want daddy to know, because he's going to shut everything down. I know, because my dad was like, he was hard
Mine
to get.
too. Oh, mine too.
He reminded me, like, listen, let me help you. Like, Allah gave me this position for a reason, because you're so valuable. And women, especially, and men too, recognizing the worth and the value of Muslim women and respecting that is so important. So recognizing, okay, I'm going to get the wali involved because marriage is a form of worship, and I want to start it off in the best way. Right, the premarital process is an extension, is the beginning of your marital relationship. So if you guys are touching and feeling, and because that's eventually what's going to happen if you don't set clear boundaries in regards to, because initially it starts off with, okay, we're just texting or we're just DMing, but now we're meeting up privately, and now we're holding hands, and now, before you know it, you're in this full-blown sexual relationship, and it's like, how do I get here? And they're in my DMs like, you know what? I just made a mistake. I just had sex with this person. Should we just hurry up and get married? It's like, no, you should separate. You should make Toba. You should fear Allah, and you should ask Allah to forgive you for this act, and work on rebuilding, building a relationship with Allah first, and getting right with Allah first by a single person, by yourself. Right. And then if you guys want to start over and do it properly with your proper wali, then start over by all means. But you want Allah to bless your marriage, right? It's an act of worship. So with salah, the same thing with prayer. There's a way. We can't just get up and pray. We have to make intentions. We have to make our wudu. It's a whole process. The same thing with marriage. You want Allah to bless your marriage, do it the right way. And He's doing it out of love for you. It's not out of, you're not corny or whack or weird for doing it this way. It's out of love for you, to protect you, because He wants the best for you. He knows how we are as human beings. And even when He, in the Quran, when He talks about, sex outside of marriage, He says, don't even go near it, right? Not just don't do it. He says, do not go near it. So acts like, talking on a phone and dating and DM and all those different things, the intention is marriage. So you want to definitely have your wali involved, and how to have a conversation with your wali. Sometimes, I talk to a lot of women, even when I have a younger sister, she's afraid to talk to my father. She's like, can you just do it? Because, can you just do it for me? It's like, I can give you the tools, but that's still a conversation that you need to have with your wali as to what you're interested in, what you're looking forward to, and just having a real conversation with your wali. And then the wali being realistic, having an open conversation with their daughters, or their guard, or whoever your wali is. We're living in different times. Your wali may not be your father. Whoever he is, you need to feel safe and open to be able to have conversations with him too. And I'm sorry, I seem like I said a whole lot and rambled a lot.
That was so profound, Dr. Shakeera. I loved everything that you said. Everything that you said was spot on. SubhanAllah. And we need to hear it. It's so important that we know what this looks like. Jazakallah khair. I benefited from that. SubhanAllah. Thank you.
Jazakallah, thank you so much. Wait, so just using your thing, does that mean that men should try and be more like Jay-Z?
Sure. It's just like, because you're valuable too. The men are valuable too. It's like, I'm going to respect you as my potential future wife enough to go talk to your wali. Like, I'm not going to go around the back door. Like, I'm coming correct. I want you to see that I am a wholesome, good brother. Right. And that speaks volumes to me. Like, I talk to these young sisters, like, oh, just things about their characters. Like, you really want to deal with that? Like, you really want this person to be your potential husband, and he's already doing shady stuff? It's like, you don't have time for that. Like, Allah, again, you're here. Allah, and you seeing, and young people and single people seeing themselves like, I am worthy of marriage. Like, I'm not settling for anything less than that. Like, I deserve marriage. Allah says, He chose me to be Muslim. He chose me to be who I am. He's not going to put a burden on me that I can't bear. I got this. I know, and then helping them deal with those physical urges. As a human being, you're going to have sex as a part of life, right? So you got to have your body naturally wants you to get pregnant or get somebody pregnant once you go through puberty. That's just the reality of the situation. So you're going to have sexual urges. So you can do like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to emphasize fasting, as you start to prepare for, before you're ready to get married, and also exercising and sports and dance and any type of physical type of act can also help you release those endorphins so that you can experience pleasure physically without having to, overstep boundaries that Allah has set for you.
No, like you touched on. See, I'm glad that you had asked that question, Cecilia, because that was something that I wanted to ask. It wasn't one of the questions, but it was something I wanted to ask because of the conversation. Because again, like we are taught here, right? Don't have sex, don't look at boys, don't even breathe near a man. And then we're all the way over here. It's like, all right, time to get married. Let's find you a man. I was like, I don't know what a man is. I don't know what that is. Man who? What is that species you speak of, right? So it's like, and then there's no in between. There's no conversation in between. There's no conversation on building yourself as a person. There's no conversation on what it takes. And if there is more conversation, I think, of what a wife's supposed to do as opposed to what a husband's supposed to do, right? But so if there is that conversation, it's mostly talked about that. And then there's no conversation again on other aspects of what is responsibilities of both the wife and the husband, right? There are dual responsibilities that we have to equal each other out and to support one another, right?
But there are conversations about where the grandkids at.
Right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's like the first thing. It's like, all right, you're gonna do the bang bang, and now you're gonna have some bang bang babies. And it's like, no, I don't even know who I am. Leave me alone. Let me enjoy myself with my husband.
You made a really good point, and I get it too, having grown up in Islam, and I definitely forgive our parents. They just didn't know. They didn't know what they didn't know, and they did the best that they can. And especially for those of us who are children of revert parents who accepted Islam, maybe back in the 60s, 70s, as mine did.
Mine did too.
They had no idea what Islam looked like in practice, right? Because they were navigating it themselves. My mother converted to Islam at 16, I think. My father a little bit older. But then shortly after they got married and they started having kids. So it was like, now I'm adopting this completely different way of life. And now I'm raising these kids. I want them to be Muslim. I want them to have this beautiful way of life that I've adopted, but I don't know what living it looks like because I haven't done that myself. So there were a lot of mistakes made along the way by our parents. Like, okay, just stay virgin. That's all I want. I'm intact.
That's not even. That's a whole nother about the hype. That is not virginity. That is not a thing.
Right.
Like, I've had Muslim women say their mothers wouldn't allow them get OBGYN exams, like vaginal exams, because they said, no, that's going to break your virginity. That's going to break your hymen. You can ride a bike and break your hymen. Like that has nothing to do with your
Right. Yeah.
It's a thin piece of like a thin membrane. It has nothing to do with anything. So we have to definitely debunk a lot of these.
That's right. A lot of unlearning.
Yes.
Maybe that'll be our next one, where it's like, all right, debunking sexual myths, right? No, because that might be something. So you might have something on here. So they might see us again soon in the same platform. Just to kind of like keep the momentum going, because we did touch on something really important. And again, this conversation is not something that's just being had today. It's something that's always going to be continuous. So we don't have to talk about it anymore. And it's just a regular conversation amongst different people in the Muslim community. So like as a question to go to, so like due to culture, is it difficult? It is difficult, right, for like some parents to speak with their kids. And I know you talked about a little bit, Dr. Omar, when you were speaking about sex and intimacy. Like, what advice would you have to help them kind of start that conversation, like for a parent to talk to their child about like sex and intimacy, or a child to talk to their parent about sex and intimacy?
Sure. So I'm going to echo something that Dr. Shakeera actually mentioned earlier, which is age appropriate learning, first and foremost. And then I'm going to couple that with social emotional learning, that you really need to understand the maturity of your child, the state of maturity that they're in, and meeting your child where they're at, not where you are. And I think a lot of parents do, well, the latter, which is you reprimand your kid because this is your understanding, just like Sister Zainab had mentioned. This is what our parents grew up with. And I don't fault them for that, because that's what their parents taught them. But we take our children, essentially, they take us, and they bring us to where they're at with their understanding and give us that, not knowing that we're growing up in a completely different world with a very different understanding of all this than they are. And so we're caught in an awkward position, clashing information from our parents, and then from what we're learning from friends, from shows, from porn, from wherever we pick up. these things, and then we don't know what's right and what's wrong in this. We're confused about our sexuality. And I know that I'm putting a very heavy thing on our parents, but the truth is you cannot claim ignorance on this. You can't. I understand that a lot of parents don't know how to have this conversation or don't understand how to have this conversation. But my belief is that in the past, you could have claimed this because of how difficult it is to come across this kind of knowledge. But honestly, you have events like this that are happening right now. You have 2 profiles on Instagram from both sisters that regularly talk about this. You have Sexual Health for Muslims account. You have Village Auntie that talks about this. Like, there's plenty of older, I'm not even talking about Gen Z, or I'm talking about older folks that are having these conversations and educating folks on how to have these conversations, how to be knowledgeable about this, how to even just talk to yourself, how to even not educate yourself on this. So empower yourself. That's the first thing I would talk to parents listening to me. Empower yourself on this. Don't plead ignorance and plead the fifth when your child asks this, or point your child towards, like, talk to your dad about this. Like, don't talk to me. I don't know about this stuff. Or a father saying, whoa, we're not having this conversation. Talk to your mom. Your mom will tell you everything you need to know. No, you're a father. She needs to hear from you on this. You're the one who will teach her what a man's love should look like and model that for her. If she can't get that from you, how will she know what that looks like when she has her husband? Like, that's why parents have such a crucial role on this. So first and foremost, educate yourself. Educate yourself on this. Plenty of resources. And if you don't know the resources, you have a bunch of panelists right here who are ready to connect you to those resources. That's the first thing I'd say. Second thing is, of course, reaching your child where they're at. So if your child is in grade school and a couple of kids in grade school are talking about, like, this kind of stuff in, like, a very juvenile way, talk to your child just about boundaries at this point. Just, what does a proper boundary look like? What kind of things that, like, you should talk to us about? And what kind of things should you avoid having conversations with other people about? Establish trust. Establish communication so that your children never feel embarrassed to talk about this with you, or feel like they can't because you're going to yell at them, or you're going to shame them, or you're going to tell them it's haram. Like, shut down conversations with them. Don't create this, because then if your child won't approach you, you better believe they're going to approach everybody else to learn about this stuff. You don't want that happening. So that's the first thing the second thing, that I'd recommend to parents. Open up these channels of communication, build that trust and sensitivity towards your child, and then be cognizant of their emotional intelligence and their maturity. This is very different, this conversation with a 16-year-old, than it would be with, like, a 7-8-year-old having these conversations. Very different conversations. But the point is, whether they're approaching you at the age of 7 or approaching you at the age of 17, this conversation should be open, should be warm, should be welcoming, and should be honest. And honesty can even mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I'm sorry. I never learned this. Or I'll learn with you. Or show me where you're going to, like, pick this up. I'll come with you. Oh, there's a halakha on this stuff, or there's a sister talking about it. Show me the Instagram live. I'll join you for that. I'll watch it. Like, I'll be there with you. That way your child feels that they're exploring this with you and not exploring this away from you, separated, detached from you. So those are my spiel. As I'm not a parent, unfortunately. I can't speak to this experience. I'm just speaking just as a son that, my parents, may Allah bless them, reward them, and give them a long life and longevity. But my parents grew up in a difficult time and come from a difficult world. For them, their goals were survival. My goal is self-actualization. Like, it's a privilege for me to even to have these conversations, because I know for sure my parents definitely did not have these conversations with their parents. So, like, it's a privilege and an honor for me to be able to do this. So as a parent, hear me as a son as I say this. Like, hear me what I'm saying. Like, this is where your child is coming from. For this.
Absolutely. And then I would just add to that, our children are a huge amana from Allah, right? A huge trust from Allah in our hands. And it's so important, like Dr. Omar said, that we have so many resources, and Allah has opened so many doors for us to experience. And I do have, like, a shameless plug. I actually teach a course to Muslim parents on how to have these conversations from the age of 3 to 21, because, like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, to play with them for 7 years, to teach them for 7 years, and then befriend them for 7 years. So I use that, and it actually coincides with so many other psychological theories and everything else. And it just goes to, again, validates everything that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says. And I teach that. I have a course called Halal Sex Talks, where I teach parents how to have these open and honest conversations at each age group and how to connect it with Islam and its spirituality. But yeah, it's just so important that we understand the importance of this topic of sexuality in general, and how sexuality is very broad. It's not just the act of intercourse, and it's not just about marriage. It's about learning about their bodies, their proper names about their bodies, how our young children are at risk for abuse. And it's so important that we educate them properly, because the risk for, sexual assault and sexual abuse is real. So
Right.
having these type of conversations with them to help safeguard them is imperative. Talking to them about consent, and then all the different things, how to have a healthy, in regards to healthy communication within relationships,
Yeah.
and so many other things, pornography, and how to bounce back from them, because we have our children have access to these pocket-sized computers, whether it's a tablet, whether it's a phone, and they have access to pornography because it's a huge trillion dollar industry that's not only accessed by adults, right? So children are also accessing this from the devices that we're buying them. So there's so many things they don't know how to navigate through that, and you as a parent have to help them through that. So it's so important that we learn what we need to learn, like Dr. Omar said, and have these conversations with them. Because if you don't do it with them, they're going to learn from Dr. Google, or they're going to learn from someone else at school, maybe one of their teachers, but they're not going to bring that Islamic piece to it, which is important to us, especially as Muslims. Our values and beliefs are everything. So incorporating that with the knowledge of sexuality is imperative.
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you so much for talking. Now, go ahead. Did you want to say something, Zainab?
No, I have
Oh.
absolutely nothing to say.
No. No, I thought I heard something, so I was like, oh, I don't want to make sure.
No.
Yeah, no, because it is important. Because again, I'm single Pringle, right? I don't have a husband, I don't have children, However, like I have these conversations with my mom, but I had to be the one to bring them up, right? Alhamdulillah, I am who I am, and Allah has like created me to be that person that asks questions. I've always been a questioner since I've been younger, However, I had to get to a place of comfortability and build a relationship with my mom first, right? And I think that goes for anyone, right? You have to build that relationship with your child first, so they can feel comfortable to come and talk to you, right? Because if my mom and me did not have this type of relationship that we have now, we've had before, I would not feel comfortable like coming to talk to her about that. Like we even had a conversation recently about like the idea of like condoms and like all these other things, right? Because again, that's also another taboo, right? Whole other conversation, right? It's like, about having like, protective sex, about the idea about like, birth control, like all of those different things, right? Because it's like the idea of like, oh, if I talk about these things, then you're going to go and do it. And it's like, no, if you talk about these things, I know about it, so maybe I won't do it, right? Or if something does happen or someone tries to convince me otherwise, I have the information to combat that. And I think, having the Islamic knowledge and knowing, okay, this is what I answer when someone asks me, like, why I wear my hijab or why I do this or why I do that, is just as important as making sure that I have, like, quote unquote, secular knowledge, right? So that way it's like, oh, well, can Muslims do this? Can Muslims do that? And it's something about sex is like, I don't know, can we? Like, I don't know what we can do. I don't have these conversations, right? And these conversations are being had at even younger ages than I am. Like, alhamdulillah, like I'm 26. Sorry, it's been like 2 months since I've been 26, so I forgot. So alhamdulillah, like I'm 26, right? However, for me, I didn't have these conversations about the idea of like sex or like something sexual, understand what that was until high school. However, those conversations did come up for me with classmates or different things like that in middle school, right? And even now it's coming up even younger in elementary school. So we need to have these conversations, one, not just for preparing them for marriage in the future, but also to prepare them to make sure that they are protecting themselves from other people that don't have the best interest, that maybe not know better, right? Other kids, maybe touching them in ways that might be normal for them and how they're being informed, but is obviously not normal in general, right? So like having this information and the idea of like what is being intimate, even something like a high five, right? Like even forgetting like throwing like sex to say out the window. Well, not throwing out the window, but in this point it doesn't exist, right? Something as simple as like, boundaries with your body, right? do you feel comfortable having a high five? Do you feel comfortable with the idea of holding like your potential spouse's hand? Do you feel comfortable with the idea of like, kissing, holding each other, spooning, all these other things, right? Those conversations should be had, prior to you guys getting married, or even just prior to even looking for marriage. Like if this is something to think about, right? Because it will come up, and it will feel awkward when it comes up, and you're like, oh, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or on the flip side, right? Because again, hypersexualization and different things like that, right? You might have somebody who is like, well, that's all I'm good for is for that, right? All I'm good for is to have sex. All I'm good for is to have babies, and I have no other function as a human being, right? Or all I'm good for is to make sure that I help her have a baby, right? I'm not good for anything else besides putting food on the table and making sure my mom has some grandkids, right? And like that shouldn't be the case. It should be more, I get quote unquote using intimate so much, but it should be more intimate. It should be more things that you guys do with each other. Even something as simple as looking into somebody's eyes, right, can be intimate, right? Like you could feel so much emotion just looking at someone, right? That's what they say, lower our gaze, because like the eyes can be so powerful. So I know I'm not a panelist and I'm just talking, but like I just wanted to, add that part in. And I'm going to see if Gareth can hear us because he's supposed to be our last panelist to talk about, like single men and like the idea of like addiction and pornography. I don't know if he can hear us. Let me check real quick. Can you hear us? If you can, awesome. Can you try turning on your mic so that way we can hear you because your mic is off? Can you try talking? I don't know if I can't hear you if you were speaking. I don't know what's going on. SubhanAllah. Technology isn't always our bestest of friends, is it?
Nope. No.
Are you talking right now? I can't even tell because I hear nothing. I just know you took your mic off. Oh no. Okay. If anything, we'll have like an extended version with Gareth only. Special edition. Yeah. No, alhamdulillah, like that's what we'll do. If there's any technical difficulties, they might get like a bonus bonus episode, alhamdulillah. Okay, yeah, we can't hear you as of right now. So what I'm going to do is I know your mic is on, but for some reason I can't hear you. So in the interim, and again, you can interrupt, like just keep trying to see if your sound will work. In the interim, as the last thing that I wanted to just bring up, because I kept talking about love language, right? What are love languages, right? And what are some of the love languages that you guys might necessarily know of yourself or different things like that? Who would like to go first? What's your love language? Or I can actually start first now that I think about it. I'm going to make this a ticker on the bottom so it's easier for people to kind of see our faces. I'm a talkative person, so it works out. Alhamdulillah. So for me, and I was one of those people, I forgot, it was like some quiz or something like on Facebook, right? And it's like, oh, what's your love language? And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but like, okay, I'll take it. And that was like years ago, but then we started talking about like in like psychology classes and stuff like that, right? So like for me, I figured that like I have like 3 like love languages. Like my thing is like quality time. If you ain't trying to spend time with me, I don't want to deal with you, right? And we don't even have to be speaking, we could be in the same room, right? Because that can also be considered quality time. You don't necessarily have to actively engage, you can just be around the person, right? Another one for me is like, words of affirmation, like tell me I look nice, right? Tell me that I'm doing a great job. Tell me, all of these different things, right? And another one for me is like the idea of, physical touch, right? So the idea of like being able to hold somebody's hand, to being held, like that idea of it sounds nice to me, right? So those would be like something that I would say are like my love languages. And I know we can like talk more about expound more about like what those are and the other ones that I haven't mentioned for anyone who wants to talk about that.
Sisters, you guys want to start?
You can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. I'll be brief then, because I know that you guys got a lot to say about this. I'm just going to make a quick plug that I think my wife and I it helped us a lot when we were in marriage talk phase, when we were just trying to discover what exactly even are our love languages, because there's a book, The 5 Love Languages, and I think it's a website too, like 5lovelanguages.com or something. Mm-hmm. And the doctor that wrote this book is Dr. Gary Chapman. Mm-hmm. And it's a brief quiz, like Najwa was mentioning. You basically take a quiz, and the quiz shows you what your love languages are. How do you yourself express love? What do you like to receive in that? And then your significant other takes their quiz, and then the two of you match up what your love languages are. Where are you compatible in your love language, and where are you incompatible with your love language? Mm-hmm. And I think this is something I would strongly recommend for anyone looking to get married. And even if you are married and you haven't done this, no better time than now to learn what your love languages are in your relationship. And like Sister Najah mentioned, there words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts. Like these are the 5 core love languages. And I know I'm just listing them out, but the point is that this is a really important thing to learn as a couple, that each of these 5 carry like a lot of weight behind them,
right?
In expressing love. And for different people, we all love different things. For some of us, like gift receiving is really it's not a big thing for us, but words of affirmation are like critical. For other people, it's the opposite. Words of affirmation sound empty to them. For them, it's gestures. They need something physically done for them to have assurance that love is being expressed. Everyone has a different way of speaking that language. And like I had mentioned earlier, if you don't know each other's love languages, then essentially you're speaking to each other in different languages. There's going to be miscommunication and misconceptions about the entire way you are even expressing and receiving love is miscommunicated to one another. So like learn each other's languages, each other's love language, and then speak fluently. Learn that language. It's like Duolingo, but for love. Like you learn a little word each day, and you start to pick up phrases. From phrases, you pick up language. From language, you then pick up fluency for one another. And our love works the same way for expressing that. So that's sort of how you learn. If you don't know what it is, I would say you can Google it right now. 5 love languages. Literally, the first result that pops up, just click the website, take the quiz. You can do it right now. Even you and your spouse can do it tonight if you want. There's no reason to delay that. The book is available, I think, in like you can get it like CVS, Walmart. Like you find it in like the book section. You can buy it for like $5. So it's readily available for you to discover what your love languages are and let your spouse do the same. That's it. It's weird. I'm plugging a book that's like not even whoever you are.
I think you. I agree though. I think that it is important. But you know what I would add to, and I would ask you both your opinions on this. I think that especially starting out as a young couple, your love language may be one thing or multiple things at one point of your marriage, but as your marriage evolves and as you evolve, your love language changes. So I know for me, it was physical touch initially, right? But as I evolved, it definitely and still is acts of service. Like somebody take this baby, like. And that is big for me, knowing that I can rely on you, knowing that when I come home, I don't bring with me the weight of the world, or if I do, you're able to handle it. That is huge for me now. So understanding that it evolves, it changes, it is not stagnant. It oftentimes does not stay the same, because our marriages don't stay the same. If you've been married for 5, 10 years plus, you know that your marriage evolves. It has to, because you're evolving as a human being. But be willing to, again, learn more and stay curious about your spouse too, right? So if their love language may have been gifts, right? It may change 10, 15 years into the marriage to words of affirmation, especially if they're doing a very difficult job where they're constantly tore down. They may need that at home. They may need that. You're a great, whatever it is you do. You're great at that. You're amazing. I loved your food. They may need that affirmation at home. So again, as human beings, hold space for your spouse to evolve, and hold space for yourself to evolve too, and be curious about one another and learning what your spouse's language has become. Yeah. So that's what I'd say. Take them kids too.
I do 100%. But yes, you definitely touched on a very important point. Especially when you're in that premarital phase, and you're getting to know the person, and once the topic of sexuality, intimacy, and love languages and all that. And I mean, that shouldn't be the first conversation, of course. That should be a conversation once you've went through the most important type of questions and you kind of like set a date and you're sure, like, this, I'm really interested in marrying this person. Now we can start talking about sex and sexuality and our love language and those type of questions. But just coming to the realization that I may have this idea now, or what I'm maybe interested in now, and I'm so sorry, interested in now, it may change, especially, we're going to grow together. We're going on this journey of marriage. I think we're going to evolve together. Like you said, it's important to mention, I think, during those initial conversations.
No, you guys made like a lot of like great points. And you talked about the kids, right?
Yeah, no, I was just yelling. Did you hear me?
No. I was talking about
not yelling, but like telling my daughter to calm down a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It happens. But and also to say, Gareth said his in the chat, because again, subhanAllah, technology is not on his side today. So he said that he actually manifests like all love languages, but words of affirmation are like what he manifests mostly, right? So like examples is like, you look really great, you're doing a great job, I love that you do this, right? Even if it's something small, you think that it's nothing, that could mean the world to someone, right? Or quality time could be you guys going on like a date together, right? Because there's always that complaint, we don't go anywhere anymore, especially with kids. I'm making an assumption, but this is what I'm hearing, right? Because I have no kids. So going out somewhere, or even just like have a TV show that you guys watch like every week. Like, okay, this week we're gonna watch, I don't know what's popular on Netflix, so whatever's popular on Netflix, right? You guys can watch it together. Or like if there's a certain like sheikh that you like watching, like they're like videos, like you guys can watch that together. Or if you guys like making videos together, that could be something as part of like your quality time, right? Physical touch could just be like going to like grab their hand like randomly, while you're near them, or giving them a pat on the shoulder, or rubbing their head, or different things like that. It doesn't always have to be like you guys having sex or doing something that's thought as being sexual. Even when it comes down to like acts of service, right? It could be like rubbing somebody's feet, but it could be washing the dishes, knowing very well I don't want to wash the dishes, right? That could be like, wow, you wash this is okay, great, because I didn't want to, like, so that could be an act of service. Or even just giving a gift, like randomly giving them something that they appreciate, not necessarily like, okay, I'm going to buy you like gold and diamonds and the most beautiful pearls in the ocean. It could really just be like, for me, like I love puzzles, so if someone buys me like a puzzle, I know it's very personal, right? Because they thought of me, right? So even though there are multiple like ways of love languages, and there's more that I keen to than others, all of them can be used towards me, or towards an individual, or towards whoever you have as your spouse, that can make it more personal and does feel like you are more connected with them. So wow, this is a great conversation. I'm just trying to see if there's anything, and yes, we will be posting the questions. Is there anything else anybody wants to add? Final comments? I know Gareth's still trying to get certain things together, but if not, just type it in the chat, Gareth, and I'll just read it out to everyone. Does anybody have anything they want to like say to leave people off with? Like if they learn nothing else from this conversation, if they just decide to never look back and rewind and watch the video over, what is something that you think should be left to them to know when it comes down to like the idea of intimacy in relationships?
Follow these sisters, please. That's the first thing to do, for sure. Absolutely. Don't just leave tonight as like, oh, I had a nice event, it was great, and then we just peace out to where we were. Like actually make an effort to like move forward with something that's more healthy and positive towards conversations around sexuality. You can start by following the sisters on Gram. You can start by like clicking the website for healthy love languages. You can start by taking Dr. Shakeera's course. There's like so much.
That's what I was gonna say. Please, wallahi, Dr. Shakeera, I'm fangirling out right now.
Yeah.
I have benefited so much from your videos. Yes, because I feel like it is something that is so not talked about. So if you do anything, please subscribe to her channel, attend the classes. I will be registering for the one you just mentioned about talking to your children. I think that's so important. So subhanAllah, I think it is so important the work that you're doing, especially around sexuality and Islam.
Yes.
We need these conversations because we are struggling.
Wait, but Sam, don't undersell yourself though.
Yes.
Yourself.
Yes.
Wholehearted Muslim.
I mean,
yeah, you have plenty for yourself to offer too.
Yes, alhamdulillah. No, absolutely, and no, definitely not underselling myself, but I think just the importance of talking about sexuality in Muslim spaces because it's too taboo, and we have too many children, right? For it to be as taboo as it is, we need to normalize these conversations, right? And I love the way that you do it. You do it in such a way that still preserves haya, and this to me is important. Like when mashallah, may Allah make you better. I'm not trying to break your back. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you far better than I think of you. But I love your approach to it. I think it's such a way that is still honorable, right? Like it's not dirty, it's not trashy. It's like, hey, this is what we're doing it in our bedroom, but this is important stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Then come over to the Muslim Wholehearted Initiative too.
Yeah.
Please. I just wanted to say that.
And that means so much to me because they be on me. I mean, the around police be at my neck all the time. Yeah. I have family members who are like, your posts are so explicit. It's like, like a lot, please.
But then we don't stay curious to know why it leaves us uncomfortable, right? Because there was something, and we were talking as a group of sisters, and a sister said this made me uncomfortable. She was talking about something she had watched on your not YouTube, on your Instagram. And as we started unpacking why it made her uncomfortable, it was not because she was opposed to it Islamically, just because she had never thought to even say what she had thought out loud. Like it strikes a nerve in a way that we have to stay curious about. Like, why does this bother me? Right? Like, why am I feeling so uncomfortable about this? Is this grounded in Islam or is this something else? And if it's not grounded in Islam, then we need to take it to the back. Like it has no place here. And that's how we have to start thinking and behaving as Muslims. Right? If it's not Islamic, we leave it. If it's based in Islam, then we take it. I appreciate them. So I don't know.
May Allah accept it. I do this to please him. This is all an effort to please him, to educate his creation. He knows I come to him all the time. Like, please, how can I teach this in a way that's
right?
So mashallah, I'm always trying to, may Allah make you better than how you think of me.
I mean, all of us for one.
Yes. And I think one of the closing things I would say to everyone is that Islam is such a sex positive religion within marriage, of course, but it definitely promotes you to have a healthy, pleasurable sexual experience within your marriage. So this taboo thing is not from our religion. So for me, if you walk away with nothing else, just that basic concept, and you taking time to really dig and learn about all the hadiths, what Allah says in the Quran about sex, and not just basing it off of your cultural upbringing that we talked a lot about tonight. Just really holding that space and coming to that realization that this is not from us. And I know it's a process. You're not going to be, of course, educated tomorrow, but just taking time to really hold space for that in your head. Like this is not Islamic for me to think this way about sex.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still muted. I got encapsulated by everybody's words, and I was like, "Oh wait, I'm on mute." Firstly, thank you guys so much for being here and for speaking on this. Gareth, I don't know if you can hear us on your end, but I think he is on. But either way, he'll interrupt me nonetheless, which is fine. A lot of these conversations, right? Like you said, like it's taboo. Not from Islam, right? It's taboo from society. It's taboo in the Muslim community. Because me personally, I always say there's a difference between Muslims and a difference between Islam, right? Because they're not always necessarily the same thing. It doesn't necessarily always equal out each other, right? Because Muslims make mistakes, but there's no mistakes in Islam. So, it's important that we continue to have these conversations. Inshallah, we will continue to have these conversations and talk about those other components that are involved with intimacy that lead to like a relationship that can lead you to either like, you know, like a halal relationship, or that can lead you to, you know, a haram relationship, and like what that means and what that entails, and maybe having again like more conversation of what to do in that in between, right? How to have again further conversations with your child, or with your teen, or with your adult, right? And for me, like trying to just normalize the idea of, you know, the fact that like men exist and that women exist, like, you know, we're not foreign entities you know, to each other. We're not something that like we are, you know, we're around each other until like what, we're like 7 or 8, and then the minute we hit puberty, like we completely separate, as if there's something wrong with the other group, right? So like just having more conversations about that, and just normalizing the idea of working together, and as the Muslim community, even if it is the opposite gender, but how to put that in a halal way, right? And how to put that where it is normal for us to have conversations like this, to be in these spaces, to have these conversations. Because at the end of the day, we need both, right? We need both men and women in these conversations together, so we can understand each other's perspectives, and also understand, like, you know, where we may be making our shortcomings, right? So I'm going to try one more time, because Gareth says he can hear us. Can you just unmute yourself real quick, Gareth? If you can, since he can hear us, can you try speaking? Dang, I don't know what's going on. Inshallah, what we'll do is, because we do have to end this particular part of the program. Inshallah, what we'll try to do is we'll have an extended version with Gareth, you know, talking about, like I said, like, you know, addiction, the idea of like pornography and stuff like that, as an extended version of our topic tonight, because we do want to have it where he is able to speak, but he might just, you know, there's a lot of technical things going on. Maybe Allah want him to be like a one-man show, who knows? You know, Allah knows best, you know, why the technical difficulties are happening. Either which way, again, I want to thank, you know, our panelists. I want to thank, you know, Allah for allowing you guys all to come here today and speak with us today, alhamdulillah. And, you know, I want to thank our audience, those who have stuck the whole time, those who are just chiming in now, and that inshallah you benefit from this, and that you are able to show this to someone who can benefit from this, or maybe this can help bring up a conversation with your parent or with your child by showing them this video, or showing them any content from the lovely panelists that we have here. And all in all, just hope you guys have like a great evening, a great weekend, inshallah, and stay safe, stay warm, eat good food, and always take out the time to learn about yourself, because alhamdulillah, that benefits not just you, but everyone around you. So hope everybody has a good night, and assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah. Thank you guys so much for an awesome conversation.
Good night.